Senator Joe Manchin, a debt ceiling savior? Hello, everybody, and welcome to the conversation. I'm David Schuster. Good to have you on board today. As the Republican-led U.S. House pushes the United States closer and closer into a default, an intriguing new player has emerged who seems to perhaps have an answer in terms of raising the debt ceiling. It is West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin. He says that he has had conversations with Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, and that McCarthy has assured him that cuts to Social Security and Medicare are not conditions for raising the debt ceiling and avoiding a default. Can Manchin be believed? Can McCarthy be believed? Well, here to talk about all of this is Christina Carrica Haley. She's a Democratic strategist. Christina, first of all, what do you make of Joe Manchin essentially inserting himself into all of this?
I think it's where Joe Manchin feels the most comfortable, to be honest. I think, it's obviously come to be much more highlighted in the past year or two, but that's where Joe Manchin has always found himself. I mean, I think if he truly continues to represent West Virginia, that's kind of where West Virginia is, right? It's a red state that has a lot of blue qualities and things like that. But I think where he's found his sweet spot is kind of, as I don't know if I would call him savior, as we did in the intro, but as a kind of broker, right? And he feels that he's able to chat with Republicans in a way that a lot of his Democratic colleagues aren't. Whether that's true or not, maybe. I mean, it has proven correct in a few situations. But I think the most intriguing part is he is able to have these conversations. However, if he keeps going back, like with the Inflation Reduction Act, et cetera, and voting with the Democrats, I wonder how long, how short his leash with the Republicans is going to get.
The state of West Virginia has something like 60% of its population relies exclusively on Social Security and Medicare. So this feels like the sort of issue where Joe Manchin can't necessarily burn the Democrats as he's burned them before by making a promise that Social Security, Medicare won't be cut, and then suddenly he's proposing a cut. But again, is that something that coming out of the mouth of Joe Manchin that Democrats can trust?
I honestly think that specifically just related to Medicare and Medicaid, because of the population in the state, that is something he can trust. Unless he comes out and makes his decision, which I hope it's not before the debt ceiling is solved, because he said at the end of February, the governor of West Virginia, I believe, is going to be making his decision about running, and thus will force Manchin to make a decision. Now, if he decides not to run, he can make a lot of interesting decisions, and it doesn't matter the percentage of West Virginians who benefit or don't from it. I don't see Joe Manchin doing that way. There's one thing to be said: he's burned both Democrats and Republicans, but he's always seemingly done right by the West Virginian people.
You mentioned Joe Manchin's political future. He's up for re-election in 2024. He hasn't really indicated what he's going to do about a Senate re-election. The other part about in terms of the trust with this equation is whether or not Joe Manchin can trust what the Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is telling him. Is Joe Manchin perhaps exceeding or giving too much trust in Kevin McCarthy if in fact McCarthy is saying don't worry about Social Security and Medicare?
I think that's tough. Trusting Kevin McCarthy after, 15 votes, I think it is, and giving away the baby, the bathwater, and anything else that was, along with it to become this speaker, this kind of new speaker of the House, as I've been referring to it, because it's kind of just a spokesperson. So that being said, trusting is one thing. I think the conversations, though, are helpful. I have actually been hearing some pretty, as a Democrat, some pretty, hopeful conversations from some Republican House members from Alabama and others that are urging for the discourse to stop from no negotiations and things like that to, hey, let's bring it to the table. So I'm hoping, the idea of no negotiations, the idea of just letting the debt ceiling go is obviously not one our country can afford. And I don't think people really understand the true economic ramifications of it. And I think that's, the lack of civic education in this country, which is a whole nother series of shows that could be had. But I think there needs to be a little extension of trust to McCarthy in the sense of being able to have these conversations to maybe promote a little bit more in the public eye, a sense of stability, a sense of hopefulness and working together. But I think at the end of the day, just as the speakership was won by Kevin McCarthy, he's going to have to give some things up, and hopefully, in my point of view, it's giving in to a lot of the demands that the Democrats have. However, a lot of the Democrats, even in the House, I believe Hakeem Jeffries either today or yesterday was saying, hey, we need to see if we see a proposal from the Republicans, then we can start talking as well. So I think the tone of negotiation is changing, which I personally think is good. I think this idea that we're not going to negotiate, we rather just, let go and see what happens until June hits and we're up a creek without a paddle.
The Democratic strategy, should there be an allowance for any sort of linkage between raising the debt ceiling and examining Social Security and Medicare? And I guess what I mean is, in my view, Social Security and Medicare should not be touched. They should be strengthened. I would suggest raising the amount of money that is paid into Social Security in the front end, but that's a whole other issue. But there's been some suggestion though, well, maybe Democrats can get Republicans to raise the debt ceiling if Democrats will agree to some sort of blue ribbon committee to study what the options are for fortifying Social Security and Medicare. Is that something Democrats can walk down?
It's a tough question. I think it's a tough question. I think it depends how much teeth that committee would have. But at the end of the day, I think if you're looking at it, all of us who are kind of inside this bubble, right? We could probably say, yes, we understand that it would just be years of talking about something and it wouldn't actually be a change. However, it would truly, truly be devastating, I think, for Democrats on a political level, on a kind of PR level, right? A disaster. And I personally, even though I'm a centrist, I'm not quite a Joe Manchin, I'm a centrist, I agree with you. I don't think that one of the pillars that is our country can be messed with, so to speak.
There's been some suggestion that, Social Security is running out of money and that there's a certain point at which it's going to pay out more money than it takes in. I think that could be within, some people say within 5 or 6 years, and might only be able to pay 85%. The way to sort of save Social Security is you either, cut benefits, or you raise the retirement age. That's sort of the binary choice that Republicans have suggested. Or there's the other thing you do, and that is you say, okay, well, right now it's the first $149,000 that gets taxed towards Social Security. Let's make it the first $500,000 so that millionaires and people who are paying a lot of money in taxes, they actually contribute more to Social Security. Where do those conversations go when Democrats say, no, it's not the raising the retirement age or cutting benefits that will solve this, it's allowing more money into the system? Is that just met with just the door being shut by Republicans?
I think honestly, both sides are a little bit guilty of shutting the doors when these conversations start to happen. And I think, to your point, this idea of a more economic approach to reforming and strengthening, I like the word strengthening, the Social Security program, of looking into what type of increased rates at the percentage of salary, et cetera, should be had. I think, in our 24-hour news era and 170 character, Twitter era, it gets very difficult for folks to even talk about this. And oftentimes they've been able to kick the can down the road, both sides have. But Republicans, for the most part, have their, 170 characters, their quotes about Social Security specifically that they know is going to get them the kind of coverage and the voter support in their districts. And they say that, and then that's the end of it. So I don't know how many true conversations are had by a majority, especially of Republicans. But I do know there are a few in the House and in the Senate that have been willing to kind of have a more economic discussion about it, which I think is where we need to kind of rely on in order to move forward in strengthening Social Security.
And politically for Democrats, does it still cut well against Republicans when you can say, look, Republicans are trying to cut or gut Social Security and Medicare, and regardless of Republicans crying foul about, oh no, that's not what we're doing, we're just changing it. Still, I mean, the perception, I think it's a fair one, is that Democrats see Republicans not liking Social Security and Medicare because it is a quote unquote government-run program, and so Republicans say it's a government-run program. They hope to score points on that. Democrats say, yeah, but they're trying to cut a very successful program. How does it cut politically?
Listen, I have to say the Republicans are great at this. I mean, I've been watching countless news stories of even Marjorie Taylor Greene toting programs that were all thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, right? So historically, Republicans have been better at selling just about anything, including something that could be detrimental to their voters and a lot of their voters. I mean, I always laugh in the villages in Florida, right? Staunch Republicans, all of this stuff. And most of them are benefiting from a lot of the programs that are demonized by the right. But somehow, and I think it's a lack of understanding of how the programs work and maybe the age differences within the parties. But somehow Republicans, no matter how they go after, how they attack Social Security, are still able to play it well. So it's actually, I think, more of a risk for Democrats to take it top full, because kind of the sexier messaging and things like that just doesn't come from our side. So the coverage doesn't happen. So then it allows the Republicans to be able to control the messaging. And so far, Social Security hasn't been one of the main issues to win or lose any of these tight races for Democrats.
And as far as the debt ceiling, how do you see that playing out over the next couple of weeks and months?
I think it's going to be very interesting when people start looking down the road a little bit at what will happen to interest rates, what will happen for small businesses and things like that. And I think that's where the tides will turn a little bit. I do hope, and maybe this is a little optimistic on my end, I do hope that McCarthy will kind of quiet the extreme, almost majority of his party, I feel like at this point.
I was going to say crazies, but keep going.
Extreme crazy, I think at this point synonymous. But hopefully, cooler heads will prevail and they'll come to it. I do not see the United States of America starting to default on things. So we might take it to the dramatic end, but I do see it being raised.
Christina, I pray that you are correct. Christina Carrica Haley, she's a Democratic strategist. Christina, thanks for coming on the program. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
You got it.